right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you have been having a great day. So we have the pleasure to invite Julia here again. It's the second time. We don't have the fireplace, but I love the concept of sitting next to you and having conversation with all the audience sitting here. So I think more than half of the audience here have done audits. And so this morning, you and Ross were talking about migrant workers, and as you can tell, I took notes, lots of notes, so I cannot wait to have more questions for you. So are you ready?
I am. I'm sorry that you have to see me again. My colleague was supposed to come, but he had an emergency issue with family, so you'll see me again, hopefully. You won't get bored. But let's try to be more practical this time, right? Let's go on concrete tips for auditors on how to engage migrant workers during auditing.
So we're going to talk about how, which is, a lot of us would like to hear. You talked about auditor, inspectors, how they conduct the inspections, and auditors here would like to hear a little bit more of that. And you started by, at some point you were talking about, well, you need to prepare. And one of the recommendation you talked about, prepare by reviewing some local news.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you mean by that. Can you give us an example what that means?
Sure. Actually, maybe I'll take a step backward now and maybe finish some of the points that I was mentioning during my previous session. Is that unfortunately, when we talk about modern slavery or forced labor, no country is immune, no country is spared from this kind of issues, although we tend to think that, for example, high-income countries are less exposed or countries where regulatory framework are stronger. But actually, there was a coincidence this morning as I actually opened up the Italian news. There was this news that one of the biggest Italian fashion company was formally accused of labor exploitation. And this is the first time that happens in Italy in terms of global brand, like high level, not the suppliers. So we're talking about the brand, international brands that was actually formally accused. Perhaps, and that's exactly just me by opening up the Italian news today. That's what popped up, right? And when I say it's the first time, because probably you might have heard what has been going on in Italy in the fashion industry. Many brands have been somehow, I actually had to translate it how to say that in English, sorry for that. So we have, as I was mentioning earlier, we have a very strong legislation and judiciary system to prevent and actually act upon when these issues happen. But during the previous scandals, let's say what happened over the past few years, major brands have been accused of neglecting what was happening in their supply chain from tier 1 onwards, right? And in Italy, we have this specific legislative provision, which is called judicial administration. It's not a formal accusation, so these brands were not accused and formally accused of labor exploitation, but the way in which it's phrased, it's negligent facilitation of labor exploitation. So even if you were not aware of what was happening in your supply chain, you did not set up enough strong mechanisms to prevent and to monitor this from happening. But it's not a formal accusation, it's a preventive measure, so there will not be like criminal recordings. It's that you need to fix some parts in your management system, but you're not formally accused. This morning, actually, one of the brands that were inserted in this administrative judicial administration was actually formally accused, and what was really was shocking to me by reading the reasons why the prosecutor was actually able to prove that the brand knew about labor exploitation, so they couldn't say but I did the audit. I did not know what was happening beyond that. Is that they received the auditor reports from an external company, and those audit reports, the brand received it, those audit reports do contain a lot of indicators of forced labor and labor exploitation, and the brand ignored it. And this was one of the reasons why, through which the prosecutor was able to actually directly link the exploitation to the brand. So they could not say like, oh, I didn't know what was happening in my supply chain, because they did receive those auditor reports. And this really was important for me to give it back to you, because I've heard a lot of conversation by talking to you these days, like, what is my role? What can I do, right? And actually, as I think it was Ariclia yesterday, you mentioned like the change starts with you. And that's exactly where your role is. And obviously, it's not all on your shoulder. Then you are part of a system that has to work together, that has to advance together. But your role is really important when it comes to engaging with migrant workers during auditors.
Right, and you also mentioned this morning about migrant workers not only means international migrant workers, but also internal migrant workers. So every single auditors sitting here or not sitting here out there, the 5,300 social compliance auditors will experience migrant workers, whether international or internal. So this conversation is relevant for all of us.
It's absolutely relevant for all of us. As I said, no country is immune, no sector is immune. So it's highly likely that probably you, I don't have anything to teach you because you've been doing this professions for many years. So probably you have encountered situations. And the best you can do is to be prepared. And actually, when it comes to preparation, one thing that I forgot during the previous session is to, beyond reading all the paper and the assessment and the reports and the news, be aware of what are the protection mechanisms in that specific country. Is there a hotline for victims of trafficking? How do you refer a victim of forced labor? Is there a system that protects this kind of situation? And maybe you might not have the, let's say, might be beyond the scope of an auditor, especially in particular context, to actually give this and handle this directly to the worker. But at least you could either perhaps insert it in your auditor report as something that then the client could possibly implement. So for example, having a list of hotline and toll numbers for protection mechanisms in the company, for example. My suggestion, I know it's, this actually could put a little bit of pressure on you, but let's say that it could happen, and it's very likely that for some workers that you encounter in your job and that you interview, for them is the only 10 minutes that they have to talk to someone that it's someone different from their employer or their co-workers. So be sure that you make the most out of that 10 minutes, 15 minutes of an interview.
Right, you touch their hearts, right, when you engage with them. And so interviewing with migrant workers is the most direct engagement that auditors have with with workers. So how should auditors start preparing the initial interaction engagement? Any recommendation?
Yes, which I think some of the tips that I will be sharing now, it applies to all workers, not necessarily to migrant workers. So probably these are some elements that you already implement, but for example, creating a private setting. So make sure obviously that the supervisor or the employer or other co-workers, unless if it's a group interview, are not there, and there are only necessary people are present during the interview, and make sure if there are more people or additional people beyond yourself and the worker, make sure that you introduce everyone the scope of why you're there, what is the purpose of the auditing, and make sure to introduce everyone. Try obviously to make sure the confidentiality, to tell them. So this is a little bit tricky. I always ask this question to the cultural mediators I work with. When we say to the workers, don't worry, whatever you're going to tell me is going to be confidential. Is it true? Are you sure 100% that this is true? Can you guarantee they will not be subjected to retaliation? They will not lose their job? So don't say something just because it's in the checklist. So the checklist tells me that, I have to say that this is confidential, although I'm not really sure whether this information will go. But make sure that you explain the whole process. How would you use that information? Who will receive that information? And obviously, it's not about, maybe what you could do is like to discuss or raise this topic with the client. Do they have a system in place to avoid retaliation? Like, do they have a mechanism to check that workers that have shared their working conditions will not be subjected to retaliation after the auditor? So this is important. It could be like an important element so that you can actually give a sense of like trust and transparency about what they're about to share with you. Obviously, inform them that the interview is voluntary. They can always stop if they don't feel comfortable in answering to some of these questions. And if they do so, just maybe try to ask why they don't feel comfortable, right? And then there are very simple tips like turn off your phone, right? Or there is I've noticed different approaches, and I would be curious to maybe have some feedback from you about taking notes. Yeah. Do you take notes during the interview or not? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just that, there are different approaches. Obviously, if you see you're talking to someone, if you see like writing down, and then you ask, why is she writing what I'm saying? And the important thing is to explain that if you're taking notes, it's because maybe you want to remember better what you're doing, and then you will use this information to fill out the report, but this is strictly confidential, you're not taking the names, and so on and so forth, right?
You actually read my mind exactly. Yeah. I was like, okay, what do you do when I have to take notes,
Yeah, and then other, maybe they're quite obvious, but make sure you pronounce correctly their name. If you're not sure, ask again.
Do you think it helps if I take notes and I show them my notes to full transparency? Does it help?
Yes, if this is allowed, obviously this is possible. They could double check whether the information they provided, and obviously if there's no language barrier between the notes that you're taking and obviously the worker, but obviously you could let the worker double check the notes that you're taking, or maybe just be aware of some basic social norms about like a particular country or a particular culture, right? Is physical touching allowed? Is handshaking allowed? Or another example, in some culture, staring at someone's eye while talking, it's actually perceived as if I'm challenging you. So to show you respect, I'd rather look down, right? Whereas if you talk to me and you look down, I would like, is she not listening to me? So these are like simple elements of social norms that could help you read the room and read the context in which you are performing your audits.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Now, so you also just mentioned and touched base on having cultural mediator, and you mentioned that earlier with the previous session as well. I would like to understand, so auditors, we don't use a cultural mediator, but we do often use interpreters. So there are differences, but I'm sure there's similarity as well. How would you prepare an interpreter before having an engagement with the migrant workers?
For sure, what you, my suggestion would be like, think as the interpreter as someone bridging the gap between you and the worker. But this person is in the middle and should become a person of trust, both for you, like you need, as an auditor, you need to make sure that he or she is providing you with correct information, but he also has to become a person of trust for the workers. So always keep in mind this kind of dual identity of a translator or of a cultural mediators, right? And also with them explain the purpose. Actually, something would be, if you're new or if it's a translator that you have never met before, maybe start, instead of like you explaining what a social audit is, ask them, do you know, like, what are we going to do now? So maybe this help you understand and change the perspective. Like, what does he expect from me? Are we on the same line? Are we on the same page in terms of what we're going to do? And then obviously then you rephrase it and you make sure that the objective is clear. Obviously make sure that they remain neutral and impartial, beyond clearly maintaining confidentiality of the information, that they do not include their personal opinion or the interpretation of what you're saying to the conversation. So if there are concepts that are very technical in terms of legal concept or labor-related concept, make sure that you clarify this in advance, and make sure perhaps to tell them, like, if something is not clear, do not figure it out on your own. Do not try to invent what I'm saying. Just ask me again, I will repeat, and then you can provide the correct information to the worker, right? And then maybe a couple of more tips on how to deal with interpreter is to be careful of the length of the translation. So if the worker replies to the interpreter, let's say with an answer that it's about 1 minute long, and the interpreter gives back to you only 10 to 15 seconds, how is that possible? Maybe ask again, like without assuming that he or she did not translate correctly, but maybe say like, was he saying, or was she saying something beyond what you translated? What was she talking about? So maybe to make sure that, you know, the interpreter translate everything. And there is an element of risk in some countries whereby within the same nations there are, let's say, tensions between ethnic groups, or tension between people from different religions, right? So a worker might not feel comfortable. This happened to us, that some workers would not talk and would not speak to our cultural mediator because he was from another region of the same country, from another ethnic minority or ethnic group or community group, right? So maybe this is something that can interfere on the quality of what the worker is about to say. So this is a tricky question. I don't know how. Maybe you figured out when is the best way to do it, but ask the worker whether they feel comfortable in talking with the interpreter. Maybe have some translated materials, right, with yes or no, like, do you feel comfortable in talking to this person? Obviously, you cannot do it in front of the interpreter, but, or maybe research in which country these dynamics could happen, so you're more, let's say, aware, right, if you feel some tension between the worker or the interpreter.
Yeah. You mentioned about length and the length of the translation, but on the other hand, I'm also thinking of the length of our questions as an auditor at it's also impacting the quality of the translation too. If I ask 2 or 3 questions at the same time, it's hard for the interpreter to translate and maybe lost in translation at some point as well.
Indeed, and maybe agree on the timing, on the methodology. So do you prefer like one question and then you translate? Stop me if I'm speaking too fast. Stop me if I'm speaking too much. That you're losing the thread. So be very open with the translator, even about the methodology on how to conduct the interview.
That be open part, it's really resonate with me to make sure. I mean, I'm a translator myself for my parents. They don't speak English, and I have to translate for them all the time. And I always need to let them know, hey, Dad, I don't know everything. I don't know all the words. So making sure that transparency it's built in before you even start the interview, it's crucial. It sounds like it. Now, so we just talked about setting the stage before the worker interviews. Let's dive right into the actual worker interview, which is quite difficult sometimes when you start, particularly with migrant workers and someone with a different culture. How do you start? How do you start building the trust? How do you make them feel comfortable? Because you mentioned trust a few times.
Yeah. As I was mentioning before, so maybe like research on some, become more cultural aware of that particular language, of that particular culture will help you. So for example, even if you just learn how to say hi or thank you in a given language that it's, you're going to interview, that could help them. Or maybe start with asking, how are you feeling today, right? And start with, for example, first of all, beyond, as we said, introducing yourself, introducing what you are there for, try to keep like try to work with empathy. Actually, you're in front of a human being, right? So as if you would talk to someone else, right? So be open-minded, don't be judgmental, and go there without pre-assumptions in your mind of what you are expecting to hear. Be ready to be surprised. And then maybe start with non-threatening questions at the beginning. How are you feeling? And perhaps this is lessons that I've learned in my more than 10 years working with migrant worker protection and victims of trafficking and forced labor. No one will raise their hands and say, I'm a victim of trafficking, I'm a victim of forced labor. No one. They wouldn't even know, they wouldn't even perceive themselves sometimes as a victims of a labor exploitation. So don't expect to receive this kind of answer direct. You need to be ready to using the indicators, for example, of ILO indicator of forced labor, to drive the conversation and to ask proxy questions that, turn around this kind of indicators, and then and then make sure that once you feel something, you continue digging on that area. Let me give you an example. No, instead of saying, "Did you pay any recruitment fee?" This is too direct. Or how much do you pay? So we teach our culture mediator when they ask how much are you paid, that if they answer with the monthly salary, to make sure that this number is not rehearsed. So someone told them, say that you are paid 1,300. Also ask them how much are you paid per day, and see whether these two numbers actually match. Or actually, most migrant workers, especially if they work informally, or they are part of their salary are paid beyond their pay slip, they would know their daily salary. So maybe ask for their daily salary and see whether this match with what is written in the pay slip multiplied by, let's say, the monthly, the number of days. Or maybe, sorry, can I give you, now you open up the gun of questions and I can talk for an hour, but I had another example. Actually, this was not from my experience, but a colleague of mine So I used to work in Thailand, so I had a colleague of mine who visited Thai fishermen with a local NGO. And this is exactly what we mean by going beyond the checklist, right? So the first thing that they ask, as part of the questionnaire, was like, do you have a bank card? And everyone said yes, because it's a legal obligation by Thai law to be employed to have a bank card. Okay, so if it was for the paper, if it was on paper, you know, it was checked, it was perfect, they were protected. But then they asked the question, and everyone raised their hands, right? But then they asked the questions, how many of you do actually have the card with themselves? No one raised their hands, because obviously the card was withheld by the employers. And this gap between what's in paper and reality, it's where abuse, labor exploitation, forced labor actually thrive. And perhaps this is the kind of gap in interviewing migrant workers that could possibly be at least shortened by conducting like a good quality interview and engaging migrant workers in a proper way.
What you just said to us is how to detect workers being coached, and the methodology to decode that, you know, being coached conversation. You help us understand how to triangulate from different sources, asking questions differently to understand there's a gap.
Another one is, where do you live? It might not feel relevant to your audit question, to your audit report, or where do you live and how do you get to work, right? Because another issue that we found in a company that we assessed is that the company was like in a remote area, and the public transportation, the only public transportation after the end of the working day was 2 hours. You know, the working day supposedly was finishing at 5 p.m., but the only public transportation was only at 7 p.m. And there was no other way for workers to go back to the area in which they were living. So obviously, what do? You are in a remote area, you don't have any means of transportation that brings you back where you live, so you keep on working. And this is the level of triangulation that you can figure it out and make come out through like these kind of proxy questions and triangulate them all.
Wow. I can't wait to talk to you more about those. Now, interviewing. Once I heard from one of the top YouTubers that the best interview that he had ever done is the one that he knew nothing about the person, and how he reached to, that YouTube video got 10 million views, and he said that the only thing I did right in that interview is by listening. So what do you think good listening is when you're interacting with migrant workers, but regular workers as well? How do you have an effective listening process with workers when you conduct a worker interview?
Well, actually, this question uses some of the tips they already gave you, right? Yes. But in general, maintain a non-judgmental kind of attitude. Do not go there as assumption. Maintain visual contact with the worker. Make sure perhaps before starting another question, repeat or rephrase the answers and ask whether what you have written is correct. Thank the person for being available to show up and being available to discuss with you. Acknowledge that it's not easy, and give a choice to the person. Means like always maybe repeat. Obviously, maybe you can say that at the beginning of the question, at the beginning of the interview, but it's good to repeat it sometimes, that if they don't feel comfortable or if a question is sensitive, they could stop. I mean, this shows a proactive listening kind of attitude, right? That you're not just like automatically asking question and, you know, checking, ticking some boxes, right? And then perhaps also like normalize the topic, give them the impression, not the impression, actually this is the reality, that other workers have shared with you information on this particular topic, on recruitment fees, so how do you feel about it? Yeah, I think more or less this are some of the tips that...
When you were talking, I was actually taking notes. I don't know if you guys noticed me taking notes. One of it is do not make assumption when you listen. And I want you, if you are a CSCA, good for you. If you are partnering with an ASCA, please bring this piece of information back with you and share that with your fellow auditors, because that is one of the top 3 reasons why an auditor failed Part 3 exam. It's making assumption. So that was actually the first item that you said, do not make assumption when you talk to someone and be curious, right? Yeah. And okay, great. Thanks for sharing that information. Now, I'm gonna make it a little bit harder for you by asking you another question. In case when there's a sensitive issue, and how do you start having a sensitive message or engaging with the migrant workers when the issue is becoming sensitive, like the wages, their treatment, and even sometimes harassment? Are you being disciplined correctly? Those kind of questions is really uncomfortable to communicate. How do you? What recommendation do you have for the audience?
One thing is to explain why you're asking these questions and why having them giving you an honest answer will support not only themselves, but it could support collectively the whole company in getting better working conditions, right? So, for example, if you are going for, once again, maybe from one side you do not ask 2 direct questions, like did you pay any recruitment fees? No one will reply yes, but maybe you can rephrase it in a way that it's less confrontational. Maybe you can say like, oh, how did you come here? Did you have to sustain any expenses in your journey to arrive in this company? Can you tell me a little bit more of your journey? Always give open questions, right? Or not, are you paid or did you pay recruitment fee? That's a yes or no question. It closes down immediately. It doesn't give the person the possibility to even choose the way in which they want to reply and whether they want to reply to this sensitive question. And obviously, if you sense tension or a little bit of unease from the workers, once again, reassure, give choice, give them the control. Like ask them whether they want to take a break, they want to take some, like a sip of water, maybe mention that there are other workers who have shared already this level of information and why it's important for you. I mean, those tips are, more or less, I don't want to repeat it, but in general, like be open to whatever comes out during the interview without like a prefixed concept in your mind.
Sure. So in an interview, there's a lot of responses to us that's verbal, but there are also often responses that are nonverbal.
Yeah.
Can you share with us what are some of the smaller gestures or tone or behaviors of a migrant that suggests their potential risk? Yeah. You talked about the indicator of risk, right? Could you share with us on that?
Well, it seems like I'm contradicting myself, but for example, from what I just said earlier, but for example, like not looking in the eyes, or looking like down, or like changing the vision, or like or distracting from actually talking to you might be an indication of unease, of being unease. or even silence per se. Like, don't assume silence as a form of being passive or like not being understood, but make sure to give the time for workers to think about what they want to see. But if you notice like a silence pattern, especially perhaps when more controversial and tricky question comes out, that could be an indicator if they hesitate, or a sudden change in patterns, in their tone of voice, in their posture, in the pace of their voice. This could be also like some indicators. If they change, for example, if they start like shaking their hands, touching or moving the chair, right? Or actually crossing the legs when, you know, particular topics, or I don't know, like
close body?
Exactly, no, like close body. But this is general kind of non-verbal gesture that it's applicable to everyone, right? Or once again, if you also sense there are overly rehearsed kind of questions, these are like some non-verbal. Actually, this is a mix of attitude that could help you put together verbal and non-verbal elements that then help you triangulate the results of the audit. And I really, yesterday we were talking with some of the other stakeholders on the difference between the evidence that you find and what you felt. Trust yourself in what you felt during the interview. What was your gut feeling? What was your instinct? Was something off going on? Trust that, and maybe ask an additional question, not just stick to, and I know that many clients just want the evidence, but you know, always keep that kind of like your feeling and emotions like present and ready to capture element of risks.
We call that auditor instinct.
Yes.
You have that gut feeling. I'm sure
Exactly.
everyone here probably, you know, have those moments that I know there's something fishy in this factory, right? Now, we talked about individual worker interview a bit. Now, I would like to switch to group interview, which all of us at some point will have to do. There's some intricacy in group dynamic, and so we need to be aware of those in relation to hierarchy, in relation to power, in relation to fear. Could you share a bit about how to spot that? What kind of observation we should do?
Yeah, obviously, like group interviews are a little bit trickier because you are talking to different individuals, and you need to pay attention to different answers, different non-verbal attitude, right? But obviously, as you were mentioning, try to spot hierarchy patterns. So if there's someone dominating the conversation and the rest of the workers are silent, but not only silent, but when they are, for example, they are asked some questions before answering to you, they look at someone else before answering to you as if they are searching from their consent to say that kind of question, right? Or if the workers actually reply the same way to the same questions, as we were saying, the overly rehearsed kind of answers. Or maybe if there is some sort of like dynamic of loyalty or loyalty/fear towards someone else, right? If you're talking and I constantly nod at what you say, even if I'm not
exactly what I'm doing.
Why would I nod like to someone, right? Yeah. So it's some sort of like non-verbal alignment, right? And also, obviously, even like the physical positioning, and sometimes probably the most obvious sign could be if someone is insisting for translating for the rest of the group. Like, why are you insisting so much? Can you maybe then change and spot someone else who is able to speak on behalf of the group and see what happens, right? Because unfortunately what can happen is that there could be some sort of illicit practice among the workers, so that maybe one has is the, let's say, the illegal recruiter of the others, right? So he has been paid by the other workers, and obviously he needs to be the one talking to the auditor, because if you talk to the others, there might be some risky aspect that can emerge. So maybe try to change if you notice someone who's really insisting to translate for the rest of the group. Accept it first, and maybe it's genuine offer, but at some point shuffle the card and change it and see what happens.
I have a question. Should I send this person away if I realize that this person is dominating the conversation? Is it an appropriate thing to do?
I mean, once again, I don't think there's it really depends on the context. I cannot say yes or no, because also it might be even more, you might even create more tension if you let them understand, let's say him, that the one dominating, that you spot there's something going on with him, and you, let's say, remove it from the rest of the group, right? He could then go back to the workers insisting, oh, what did you say to the auditors, and then check on everyone, right? So maybe what you could do in a way that it's more nuanced, maybe you can split the group, you can say, I would like to hear from more people, I would like to hear from this person, I would like to have everyone to have the opportunity to speak out. So try to find a way that is not so evident, I would say, to let someone out.
Right.
But once again, it really depends. I trust your instinct of reading the room and being aware of what's going on, and choose the best approach.
Sure. So we just talked about someone that really wants to dominate and talk a lot. What about the opposite? Someone that doesn't want to talk, or you sense hesitation. What do we do, or even fear? What should we do?
As I said earlier, always try to make them feel at ease and listen and understood. Reiterate the reason why you're there, the reason why it's important for him or her to talk to you, what is the auditing purpose, and always give them the choice to interrupt or to speak in another context, or respond to another question, for example, and then we go back to the most sensitive question afterwards. But these are tips that could be used to let's say, release a little bit the tension that makes migrant worker feel unease.
Oh, great. I think we're coming closer to the end of the conversation. If I would like to ask you one big takeaway, a small change of practice that you can share with auditors here and also outside, what would you say that it will be a small change that can have a big impact on when you engage with migrant workers?
Can I actually say 2 or 3?
Yes.
Because one is too little. No, one practical one is bring translated materials that can help you talk to the workers and interview the workers. We talked about how AI can support social compliance earlier. We have all the tool now to translate our materials and text in so many different languages, even if we don't obviously speak all those languages. But try to bring with you visual aids, translated materials that can support you in conducting the interview, or even a green and a red button. If you feel that you don't feel at ease, just put your hand in the red button, or if you feel that we want to continue, those kind of visual aids. And in general, I would say more theoretically, as my takeaway, it's always to put the worker at the center of your interview. That's ultimately why you're there for. It's called social compliance. It's not product compliance. It's not it's not product audit. It's not environmental audit. It's social auditing. So social means you're dealing with human beings, and human beings must be at the center. And trust your instinct in asking an additional question if needed.
Great. I'm going to start putting that as my the top of the training material, put worker in the center of the conversation, because it covers do not make any assumption, listening to them, asking follow-up questions. Hint to those that are going to take the Part 3 exam, those are the best tips that Julia just mentioned to us. I think we don't have any time, but if anyone have any burning question to ask, Julia will be here to answer, and the next will be a break.
Yeah.
So
Even during the break, if you feel more comfortable, if you don't feel at ease and asking questions in front of everyone, just feel free to reach out to me during the coffee.
And they learn
Speaking of putting people at ease,
right? And they learn about the best way to interview.
Exactly.
So they're going to interview you with lots
I'm
of
Italian, so if you want to say ciao to me, that's fine.
All right, and thank you so much for joining us for the conversation.